Hey all, it's Vizniz here. I want to talk about a build that I've been playing during the Legacy of Phrecia League. Namely, I've been playing a Herald of Ice, Lightning Conduit, Surfcaster. The reason I've been playing a Surfcaster is because they have these fun little nodes down here, in Screaming Reels and Bated Breath, which have fishing rod synergies, which will grant all of your hits to be critical strikes, including explosions and the heralds, as well as a huge amount of cast speed multiplier in the 50% more cast speed here, as well as some bonuses in the Illegal Fisherman, giving you 30% turbo, 20% damage, as well as a bunch of synergies in Stormy Seas, where you get to convert all your lightning damage to cold damage, as well as allowing it to shock. Now, why would you want to play this build? Well, explosions are pretty cool, and blowing up packs of enemies is great. Stormy Seas, which gives 100% of your lightning damage converted to cold damage, as well as your cold damage can shock. So now all of our lightning and cold are cold, and they both gain the elements of chilling, freezing, and shocking, which means that we have a huge incentive to scale elemental ailments. And something that's particularly good with scaling elemental ailments is a skill called the Lightning Conduit, which, as you can see here, gains a huge more damage multiplier as you gain more and more shock effect. So we take advantage of that on the tree by increasing our max shock effect, and we use clusters to help build out some more shock effect as well. Now, as I said, the ascendancy due to our fishing rod bonuses gives it so that all of our damage are critical strikes. So what we've been doing is playing with a Herald of Ice character, a little different from the traditional Herald of Thunder character you may have seen around, where we'll be using Frostblink of Wintry Blast to teleport forward. This spell will kill enemies, critting them, freezing them, shattering them. When they shatter, our Herald of Ice will proc. It'll cause an icy explosion, which will also cause critical strikes, which will freeze, which will shatter, and it'll continue on. This can lead to some very smooth gameplay, especially if you're doing content such as like Breach or Legion, where large packs of monsters are the focus. I can show a quick example of kind of how the gameplay plays. As I said, we will be using Lightning Conduit as our single target solution, because again, Frostblink isn't exactly known as the most single target oriented of skills, and Heralds for sure are not. So the gameplay loop will consist as follows. You just kind of go forward, you blink around, whoops, very nice. Your Frostblink will kill things, shattering them, causing your Herald of Ice to proc, which will again shatter more. Nice, easy, smooth gameplay loop. And then for single target, we'll drop in Orb of Storms, which as we cast Orb of Storms, or as we cast Lightning Conduit, I can kind of show it here. Normally, what will happen is, if you shock an enemy, they have a shock percent here, you see 65%. If you Lightning Conduit them, it consumes it. However, in conjunction with Orb of Storms, or Hydrosphere if you want, every time I cast Lightning Conduit, the Orb of Storms will then shock it again afterwards, allowing you to spam the ability. Now then, let me talk about some of the choices. This is a budget variant. The current one that I'm playing here, the Simply Fisher price or whatever, is kind of the bare minimum, maybe even a little below the bare minimum, honestly speaking, of what I would recommend playing this character as. And I'll show you some of the choices and why I'm doing it. So first and foremost, we can talk about the passive tree. We start in the shadow area. I like heading to the right here for some recover life on kill. It's quite nice with the playstyle where you kill a bunch of monsters. Sometimes you get clipped, but it'll snap you back up to full. We head over here. I take a Glorious Vanity Doriani Jewel. The reason I am taking this is because our ascendancy is very cast speed oriented, right? We have 30% cast speed here. We have 50% more cast speed here. We can take even more cast speed on our rings. As you can see, our character is capable of spamming Lightning Conduit at quite a rate, which means that our mana cost is quite high. So in this case, what I've opted to do is I'm taking a Glorious Venue with Doriani as a source of effectively mana, but in the form of Energy Shield to be used in conjunction with Eldritch Battery, which causes our Energy Shield to, instead of protecting our life, be used as a mana source. As we head up, so we're an elemental skill, right? Some of the important things for elemental skills are how do you deal with resistances? So some of the ways you can deal with the resistances are exposure, lowering resistances, curses, lowering resistances, penetration, which bypasses percents of resistances, and then this elemental mastery that is quite popular, which will cause a quarter of your attacks to invert the enemy's resistance. A popular strategy of this league involves map modifier effect, and even just like 8-mod maps tend to come with a lot of resistances. So instead of opting for a bunch of elemental shred, we have instead opted for penetration, as well as using the elemental mastery here as our solution to resistances. We take this crit wheel because, again, we have 100% crit, so critical strike multiplier is a premium stat for us, as well as the critical mastery here for increased effect of non-damaging ailments is especially impactful when we're using things such as Bone Chill and Lightning Conduit, which rely on ailment scaling. We'll be moving into clusters. The main things you're going to be wanting to look for are things like Blanketed Snow for, again, further penetration, or Blast Freeze, which is a way to proliferate out your freezes. We'll move here into, we need to take a lightning mastery somewhere. There are a few choices. You have this one here, which has 2 good leading up nodes, which are these multiplier nodes, but then this increased critical strike chance is not very useful to us. And then this one, which has a bunch of effective lightning ailments, as well as damage if you've shocked recently, which you will always do. The main reason we do this is because you need maximum effective shock to help push your general damage, but especially Lightning Conduit, because it has a massive multiplier again, based on the amount of shock an enemy has. We take a Presage here for a little bit of Herald AoE to help with our chains from the Herald of Ice, as well as much needed reservation, since if you support Heralds with a bunch of skills, they tend to be quite costly. As a temporary solution for the budget build, we're taking Careful Planning here as a source of dexterity, although later on you place this by having it on your rings. Typical Life, again, we're expanding out into another cluster here. I can show the clusters. So on this side, I am using 2 non-damaging ailments, both with Overshock and Astonishing Affliction. If you want, you can replace one of the Astonishing Afflictions with a Blast Freeze, which will free up some space on your large cluster later for improvements. But for now, Astonishing Affliction and Overshock are incredibly high-weighted modifiers on the clusters, making them very easy to roll. As you can see here, these both have chaos resistance on them. Because the weights are so high on these notables, you can just use the Harvest Bench to chaos reforge until you hit both notables. It does not take many to be guaranteeing an extra little bit of resistance. A lot of our jewels in the budget variant will just be life and resistances, things that you can pick up for a few chaos. Sometimes you'll have life and elemental critical strike multiplier. In this case, I would recommend it and global critical strike multi, like generic global critical strike multi, are the only things that are going to help both your Herald device as well as Lightning Conduit. That being said, later on, I will probably recommend you have a focus on critical strike multiplier with lightning skills, as your Herald device, especially in conjunction with Oriath's End later on, will be more than sufficient for clear, and pushing your single target to the utmost will be important. We head over to the left side into the Templar area for some reservation, a little bit more damage from Divine Judgment, an extra endurance charge to go with our Ralakesh, which thankfully are incredibly cheap this league. So it's a nice consistent source of frenzy and endurance charges, as well as chaos resistance. And then a little bit more life through the devotion wheel. We can talk about the gear now, where, so you'll have a fishing rod. Again, these are, the means of acquisition for a fishing rod are going to be the following. One, you will probably just buy one off the trade site, first and foremost. But if you want to acquire one for your own, you can try to farm a Reef Bane, which is like a T0 fairly rare unique. you can farm a regular fishing rod. The way you farm a regular fishing rod is by equipping something called... Oh, my character is wearing it on the other side. Oop. A Fairgrave's Tricorn. This little helmet here. If you are wearing a Fairgrave's Tricorn and you kill a unique enemy, you have about, I would estimate, a 1 in 1500, a 1 in 2000 chance of dropping a rare fishing rod. Or a magic fishing rod, whatever. A regular fishing rod. There's a couple ways you can go about this. You can farm it in maps through things like Remnant of Corruption unique monsters, Glacier unique monsters, Rogue Exile unique monsters, Vault Temple unique monsters. Or, real quick breakdown of how to farm fishing rods in the axe. 1, you need a Fairgrave's Tricorn. 2, you're going to start in Imperial Fields, zip your way down. You find the Grain Gate entrance down yonder. Grain Gate. There are 3 different spawns. You're going to hit this wall. You can either go forward, in which case it's good, or you have to continue along the wall. You can then go forward here, which is bad, or you continue along the wall. At which point, this is the 3rd spawn. The gemlings will be right here. You will kill them. You will return. You will reset the zone. So this one is bad. This is a reset. It is in the bottom corner there. This is a short wall. You go through. It'll be through the first warehouse. Kill the gemlings. Get out. But either way, you need a fishing rod. It's part of the ascendancy. It's mandatory. Reefbane is better because it has higher cast speed than what a regular rod can have. However, if you want to go into something like Aspect of the Crab for more physical mitigation, which the build does lack, a regular rod is something which you can put an aspect on. Our choice of helmet, there's a few helmets you can wear. In this case, I'm going to recommend, for the most case, for people to use Replica Heat Shiver. Again, you're a build that wants to push your shock effect as much as possible because Lightning Conduit is your source of single target, which synergizes great with Replica Heat Shiver, which also wants you to push your shock effect. Would highly recommend it. Comes with a couple res. They're pretty plentiful. You can even find good corruptions, things like cold damage leech, cold ailment scaling, lightning ailment scaling, +2 gems, even reservation, although those are more expensive. Amarylline's Fallacy, as we spoke earlier, it's a huge source of global critical strike multiplier, especially when you apply catalyst to it later. There are critical catalysts, which can push the number even higher. You can have almost, slightly over 280 global critical strike multiplier, as well as culling strike. It's a huge item to have. And because of the relative common nature of it in trade, you can once again find good corruptions here. You can find things like Leech, if you wanted to have it here. You can have all resistances. You can, if you want to adjust the build some, you can go multiple curses. Our rings, again, in this budget variant, are going to be relatively simple. They're going to be life, whatever suffix you can get, ideally a res one. In this case, they have like a little bit of all res. You can have like 30 of a regular res is also fine. But you want life, cast speed, a decent suffix, and then an open prefix for non-channeling skills have reduced total mana cost. Because again, the spammy nature of the lightning conduit in the build makes you want to reduce this cost as much as possible. We're once again wearing Ralakesh. It's an easy source of physical damage mitigation, elemental damage mitigation, consistent frenzies, as well as some decent resistances. You can find corruptions this league. There's like movement speed, suppression for later. Endurance charges are fairly expensive, but they are an option. For our belt, we're just going to use a Stygian with as much life as we can get and whatever useful suffixes we can get. It really doesn't matter, honestly. You just kind of want to bolster out the life sum. In this case, we have some chaos resistances and an open suffix for even more chaos resistance. We'll be using Thunder Fist, which is a great source of flat damage for specifically our Herald of Ice to help it in the initial stages to chain through while we're still kind of building up the character. As well as, very importantly, this 100% increased effect of lightning ailments helps to make sure that our lightning conduit is as close to 65, if not above, as possible. As I talked about, there are other choices as far as some of these pieces of gear if you want to kind of deviate around, and I'll have a set of POBs so people can play around with the different assortments and see kind of the general progression from, call it under 10 div, it's something like 5 div, 6 div, a lot of it's the fishing rod. Either way, something you can use is a replica Alpha Howl. You don't necessarily have to have a corruption, although it wouldn't be bad. This is a great way to bolster out your Herald device if you don't want to use Thunder Fist, or if you have enough shock scaling where you don't need that ailment modifier anymore. It gives you a ton of reservation for your Herald. It's a great way to boost your levels again, which are a ton of damage. It boosts your resistances, cannot be hindered is not a bad mod, and again, you can get a lot of different corruptions on this. You can get stuff like +2 AoE, +2 cold, reservation. As far as the chests are concerned, so in this case I'm using a Cloak of Flame. I'm using a Cloak of Flame for 2 reasons. First, it's very cheap, very plentiful. Second, it's kind of a easy way to have physical mitigation in the build while having a chest that's easy to color still, as well as to kind of help bolster out the resistances while you're figuring out the rest of your gear, right? Like our rings don't have a lot of resistances, our belt doesn't have a lot of resistances. That being said, if you do figure out the resistances, Lightning Coil is going to be a better chest. You don't necessarily need this corruption, just Lightning Coil in general is better. Something you can use in addition to a Lightning Coil is a Yidna stand to go with Lightning Coil, as it's a way to give yourself, you get like a 900, a 1000 ward shield, providing you can wear it. You'll just have to believe me. But you don't get hit that often in the build, so it's kind of a nice way to make sure that you stay alive when something does hit you. Another thing you can use is a Doppelganger's Guise. I would highly recommend, if you are going to go this route, to get one that has a 40% less physical and chaos damage taken while sane multiplier. This item, it doesn't have, it's not like a rotational thing. It's just, do you want to be sane? Do you want to be insane? You will choose the sane one. You won't turn on the ability. It'll give you great physical mitigation, great chaos mitigation, especially if you're ever going to do something like simulacrums later on as you scale up, as well as a little bit of recovery when you get hit. And again, this is one of those items where there's people farming Maven all the time, right? You can find corruptions for this. Try to find like, you know, a 39, a 38, a 37% with like a really nice corruption. The other option you have, although this will be later, this is less budgety than these other ones, will be an Esh's Grasping Mail, or even just like the Esh's mod move to like a necrotic armor is a good choice. The reason this one is suggested, and I played with this for a little bit, I have a chest somewhere, this one. This is like my old chest that I was using on my other character. This modifier, if you've ever played like old Autobombers, we used to play with something called Esh's Mirror, which effectively had the same mod. And if you are zipping around the map, blowing up large packs of monsters, especially again if you're doing something like Breach or map farming through shrines or just like big pack size scaling in T17s, you're going to be killing hundreds of monsters recently. This is going to, like, typically this will triple or quadruple your Herald damage. It's a very large amount. As well as if you ever need to like quickly kill a map boss at the end or a particularly tanky rare, it will boost to your lightning conduit quite a bit. Some other gear choices I can talk about are going to be things like Biscos, which I'm actually kind of a big fan of. The problem is Biscos is you lose a lot of life playing with this over a Stygian. You know, 3700 versus 4200. But Rampage is cool and increased rarity is great for gold, so take that for what you will. You can play within that series Promise. This is another way to get Leech into the build. As I said, you can get Leech on your helmet, you can get Leech on your necklace, you can get Leech on a cluster, you can get Leech on that series Promise here. You get a little bit of damage from it, and you get Leech, and you get Chaos Res. It's an okay item. Not really that recommended. And then later on, you're going to be bolstering out your build. Again, the POVs will have this, but you'll be picking up like Awaken gems. You'll be picking up an Oriath's End to help your clear. But now I'll just have some footage of some general gameplay. It'll be stuff like breaches, some T16 maps, some high map modifiers, some T17s, some stuff done on budget characters, some stuff done on my high-end character, some Ubers, just to kind of give you a grasp of how some of the stuff plays out. And as spoken about before, you are good at clearing groups of enemies. You can kill the single target, you can kill breach lords and all that, but you are fragile at this level of investment, so just be wary. You need to constantly be moving. You need to be the aggressor. But you're just looking for something simple to blow up giant packs of enemies. There'd be breach, shrine, altar farming, whatever have you. It'll definitely fit the bill. just maybe consider putting a portal down every time you start a bunch of breaches. Something I would highly recommend is while you're standing still, looting, checking altars, whatever, to put down an Orbit Storms and just hold the lightning conduit button. Kind of protect yourself against things coming to kill you. Something else that it will be pretty good at doing is, you know, putting a bunch of shrines in your map, running down silos. It's a good way to generate T17s, it's a good source of gold. It's okay for altar farming. You'll get the occasional ritual drops. Here's an example of a T17. I wouldn't terribly recommend going into T17s at the budget level, and even for this I've even picked up an Oriath End to help supplement the clear a little, but we'll try it anyway, just to kind of show what it's like. Again, speed is kind of the name in the game. You want to be moving forward, because mobs will kill you. You're not very tanky. Not at this point, at least. But do clear very well. You can definitely see there are some stragglers. But for the most part, you just kind of blink around, everything dies. Ow. Lightning mobs. They're cheating. It's a Gloom Shrine. I'll avoid the Gloom Shrine. That's probably too much. Alright. This will surely go well. Ow. %chill so nice here, honestly. Keeps him in control. Flask Meteor. Again, would not terribly advise going the T17s at this point. But if you really want, you kind of can. I'd recommend picking up better mitigation, some leech. I'll show a quick example of just a regular Eater of Worlds, not Uber. This character isn't quite that crazy to be able to do such a feat. Just to point out a few things, some things you want to keep in mind as you're scaling up the character is, so Lightning Conduit is a skill that scales off shock, right? Shock increases damage enemies take as well as gives a bunch of bonus damage for specifically Lightning Conduit. And you can see here we're only attaining about a 44% shock, sometimes 49, sometimes 65, but on the regular it is not a pure 65% shock. That is something you'll want to keep in mind as you're doing content, that you'll want to try to make sure that your ailment modifiers are high enough that your shocks are consistently 65. It'll be a big part of your damage. It helps your clear as well. Since all of your damage can shock, being a lightning cold build, everything gets converted to cold. Surfcaster makes it so it shocks. But definitely something to keep in mind. As well as the chill amount, since we are using Bone Chill alongside our Orbital Storms to apply a little extra bonus damage. Alright, this will just be a quick example of an Uber Eater of Worlds. Nice kind of target dummy boss, right? Show what you're capable of doing as far as single target is concerned for this build. Notice our shocks a lot of the times are going to be 65, but not quite all. Missing a little bit of ailment in that sense, which is pretty bad for Lightning Conduit. You do want that to be a 65 as much as possible. Alive, somehow. All right, let's do a quick example of a T17 or on most of the map, maybe not all the map. Show T17, we'll do a fortress, pretty typical. This has extra life, reflection, which is covered by a forbidden, some Waker Desolation on the ground, which is going to be annoying, but we do have a good amount of mitigation and max res, as well as doppelgangers, as well as the monsters will have capped resistances, which you have a lot of penetration, as well as you have inversion, so not the biggest deal. Do fortune favors, the map stats. It's a bunch of map modifier effect and pack size. It's a pretty typical setup. The primary way you will go through maps is you'll be spamming Frostblink Wintry Blast. This will kill monsters. It'll freeze them as well, which will trigger your Herald device, which will start cascading out, killing more and more monsters. You can use things like Oriath's End to help bolster your clear. I'm using Herald of Ash as well, although it's mostly just because Herald of Ash looks really cool. You can be using Arctic Armor or Flesh and Stone here instead. Alternatively, with a bit more reservation, you can fit in Purity of Ice to help with your max resistances if you're struggling to hit 90. So again, our gameplay loop is Frostblink around. If you really need single target, you Orbistorms, Lightning Conduit. This is how the gameplay goes. Holy lag. Proximity shields can be a little dangerous. My recommendation, since they are temporary abilities, tends to be to go past them, kind of loop back around and see if they've fallen off. You can see the abilities getting disabled there. Sometimes when I need to stand still, such as to read altars, I will use Orbistorms and Lightning Conduit. You don't really have to even be paying attention to what you're doing, just be using the abilities. We do have a secondary Frostblink to make it so that you can zip around a little faster. Here's the boss. Again, Orbistorms and Lightning Conduit are your single target. He is a chunky boy. We can see the map modifiers here. 140 life, some resistances, not that big a deal. Alright, that's it. That's the video on the Surfcaster, Auto Bomber, Herald device, Lightning Conduit guy thing. If you have any questions, as always, leave a comment below. Visit me at the Twitch, whatever have you. I do want to stress, especially people who are going to like pick up the budget build, you're going to die some. Not the sturdiest build. It's designed to blow up screens and have fun. You're going to hit the ground a few times. Just be aware of this. It gets better, I promise. You can scale it all the way up. This character's capable of doing pretty much all content. I can't do like the super juiced Rogue Exile Titanic stuff, but I can do Titanic map bosses, which is close enough, I guess. Either way, y'all been a pleasure, and I'll wish y'all a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for checking it out.